Okay, so you want to understand how narcissists operate, like how they actually pick their targets and what tactics they use to control them.
Yeah.
Buckle up, because today we're going deep on this.
Oh, this is going to be good.
We've got a whole bunch of sources that break down the manipulative strategies narcissists use, and some get pretty intense with their language.
Oh, yeah.
Others are more about practical advice, like how to protect yourself, stuff like that.
Yeah.
And one thing that really surprised me is how many of them say that narcissists don't always go after, like, the weakest people.
Right. It's not always the most vulnerable people, no.
It's often the strong, confident ones.
Yeah.
Which seems kind of counterintuitive, right?
Yeah, why would a narcissist go after someone who's not, like, an easy target?
Exactly.
Well, one source I read had this really vivid description. It said, imagine, like, a narcissist needing to, destroy everything that stands in their way so they can feel superior.
Wow.
And bringing down a strong person feeds their ego, in a way that manipulating someone vulnerable just doesn't.
I see. So it's not just about, like, winning an argument or something.
Right. It's not just that.
They want to dominate the whole relationship.
Exactly. Whether it's a romantic relationship, at work, even in a family.
So they see strength in someone as a challenge.
Yeah.
Almost like a threat.
Yeah, like a threat to their sense of self.
Makes sense. And, speaking of that need for control, one source even said that they, quote, desire nothing more than to be in a position of power and, quote, will attempt anything that has a chance of being successful.
Yeah, I mean, that need to be superior, that's like the core of everything they do. It really is.
It's like we're these unsuspecting pawns in their game.
Absolutely. And speaking of games, that leads us to their tactics.
Okay, let's talk tactics.
I'm sure you've heard of love bombing.
Oh, yeah.
But have you ever thought about what that looks like in real life?
Well, some of these sources use really, like, colorful language.
Yeah.
Sprinkle some flattery and charm, almost like a recipe for manipulation.
Right. It's pretty disarming, yeah. And one source even gave an example of a narcissist, like, mirroring your interests and values to create that instant, like, feeling of connection.
Oh, wow.
But we have to remember, love bombing is just one of their tools.
So what if the charm offensive doesn't work?
Yeah.
Like, what if someone doesn't fall for the whole love bombing thing?
Right.
Do they just give up?
No, not at all. That's when things can actually take kind of a darker turn.
Oh, okay.
They might play the victim, trying to get pity, trying to get attention. They may even go as far as making up illnesses or injuries.
Oh, wow.
So they create this sense of urgency and dependence. Have you ever felt pressured to help, like, a friend who's constantly in crisis, but they never seem to take your advice?
Yeah.
Or make an effort to actually change their situation?
I mean, yeah, I think most people probably have at some point.
It makes you think, right?
Yeah. Okay, but what if someone sees through both of those things? The charm and the pity play.
Yeah.
What's next?
Oh, well, they might move on. Okay.
To an easier target.
Right.
But some of the sources describe this last-ditch effort to get control. And that can get even more devious.
Okay, like what?
So they'll start to look for weaknesses. Your kindness, your loyalty, that desire to help.
Yeah.
They might even try to turn your own friends and family against you.
Oh, right. That reminds me of that whole flying monkeys thing.
Yeah, exactly.
It sounds like, something out of The Wizard of Oz.
Yeah.
But it's actually, like, pretty disturbing.
Oh,
When
absolutely.
you think about it.
Yeah.
So essentially, the narcissist manipulates those close to you.
Right.
Friends, family, colleagues.
Yeah.
Turning them into, like, agents of their agenda.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Spreading rumors.
Yeah.
Twisting your words.
Yeah.
Trying to isolate you from your support system.
Classic divide and conquer.
It is.
But how do you even spot these flying monkeys? And more importantly, how do you spot the narcissist pulling the strings? Well, recognizing the signs early on is, like, super important. One source really stressed paying attention to actions rather than words.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Because they might apologize.
Right.
And promise to change. But if their actions don't match their words.
Yeah, that's a huge red flag.
Huge red flag. And one of the sources actually used this really vivid image. They said, imagine a narcissist, forcing you into a ditch after you just help them out of one.
Wow.
It really captures that, like, manipulative nature of what they do.
It does. Taking advantage of your good intentions and then turning on you.
Leaving you feeling so confused and betrayed.
Yeah.
It's almost like they're constantly playing a role.
Yeah.
Putting on a performance to get what they want.
Yeah, in a sense they are, because their sense of self is often, like, really fragile and insecure. They need constant validation from others.
Right.
Admiration.
So to get that, they might resort to some pretty extreme measures.
Oh, yeah.
Like what?
Well, one source actually mentioned gaslighting.
Whoa, gaslighting.
Yeah. Which is a form of psychological manipulation.
That sounds intense. How does that even work?
It's subtle, but it's insidious. They might deny things that you know to be true, twist your words. They might even try to plant false memories in your mind.
So they're like rewriting reality.
Yeah, to fit their narrative.
And that can really mess with your sense of self.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
Especially over time, you start to question your own judgment.
So what can you do if you think you're being gaslighted? How do you protect yourself?
Well, one of the most important things is to trust your gut.
Okay.
If something feels off, it probably is.
But what if the narcissist is really good at making you doubt yourself?
Yeah.
Like, what if they've already planted those seeds of doubt?
Right, that's a good point. One source suggests keeping a journal or log
Okay.
of all your interactions.
With the narcissist.
Yeah, noting anything that seems off, red flags, inconsistencies.
So it's like creating a paper trail.
Yeah, to
Yeah.
document their manipulation. It can be a really powerful tool to like hold them accountable and remind yourself of the truth.
Wow. So we've talked about love bombing, playing the victim, exploiting weaknesses, using flying monkeys, and even gaslighting.
Yeah.
It's like they have a whole playbook.
They do, and they're really good at adapting their approach
Okay.
for each situation, each target.
So how do we spot the patterns?
Yeah.
And protect ourselves?
Recognizing the signs, that's crucial.
Okay. What are some of the red flags?
Well, one source listed a few key things, like an inflated sense of self-importance,
Okay.
a constant need for admiration,
Right.
and a lack of empathy for others.
It's like they're the star of their own show, and everyone else is just like a supporting character.
Exactly. And because they're so focused on their own needs, they often have trouble like recognizing or respecting the needs of others.
So how do you even deal with someone like that? Can you have a healthy relationship with them?
Well, that's a tough one. Some sources say it is possible to have a relationship,
Huh.
but it's limited and requires setting some very firm boundaries and, realistic expectations.
But what if those boundaries are constantly being tested?
Yeah,
What if they keep pushing?
that's where things get tricky. One source I read emphasized that narcissists are incredibly skilled at manipulating people,
Yeah.
and they often use guilt, shame, and fear to get their way.
Like walking on eggshells, never knowing what's going to set them off. So
Yeah.
what's the alternative?
Yeah.
Is it just better to cut them off completely?
That's a really personal decision. Each individual has to make that choice for themselves, based on their situation, their tolerance level.
But walking away from a relationship can be really hard.
Oh, absolutely. Especially one that's been going on for a while.
Yeah. So we've talked about like all this dark stuff.
Yeah.
The manipulation, the gaslighting. But are there any like positive aspects to this personality type?
Well, that's interesting.
Yeah.
One source did say that in certain contexts, they can be very charming,
Oh,
charismatic, even inspiring.
this is not all doom and gloom.
Right. There's some nuance there. But it's super important to remember that those positive qualities are often like really tied to their need for admiration and control.
So they're using those good traits
Yeah.
to get what they want.
In a sense, they are. But I don't think that means those qualities are like fake or insincere. It's just, they're driven by this deeper, more complex motivation.
So how do you tell the difference between like genuine charm
Right.
and manipulative charm?
That's a great question. And one source said it's all about looking at the consistency of their actions.
It's okay.
Do their words and their actions match up?
So if they don't, red flag.
Exactly. Huge red flag. And trust your gut. If something feels off, it probably is.
Like they say, if it looks like a duck, swims like a duck, and quacks like a duck, then it probably is a duck.
Exactly.
So with narcissism, it's really about being aware of those signs and trusting your judgment. So we've covered a lot of ground. The tactics, the red flags. But what's the one thing you want our listeners to really take away from this deep dive?
I think the most important thing is to remember that you have the power to protect yourself.
Okay.
You don't have to be a victim.
Yeah.
By understanding their tactics, setting boundaries, prioritizing your own well-being, you can break free from their control
Okay.
and start living a happier and healthier life.
It's like taking back your power,
Yeah.
reclaiming your own story.
Exactly. It's about recognizing that you deserve to be treated with respect.
Yeah.
And you don't have to put up with abuse from anyone, no matter who they are.
Right.
What role they play in your life. You know that whole thing about doubting your own reality?
Yeah.
That's one of the hardest things about dealing with a narcissist.
Yeah.
They're so good at making you question yourself.
You're talking about gaslighting.
Exactly, gaslighting.
That term gets thrown around so much these days. But what does it actually look like in a relationship?
Well, one source described it as the narcissist trying to rewrite history, to fit their own story. So they might deny things that happened, twist your words around, even try to convince you that you're remembering things wrong.
Oh, wow.
It's a slow and subtle form of manipulation.
Yeah.
It can really make you question your sanity.
That's terrifying. How do you even know if you're being gaslighted?
It's subtle, which makes it so dangerous. But there are red flags. Like if someone constantly denies your reality, makes you feel like you're going crazy, tries to isolate you from your support system, those are signs that gaslighting might be happening.
So if you're always second-guessing yourself,
yeah,
that's a sign to pay attention to.
Absolutely. One source actually recommended keeping a journal.
Oh, okay.
A detailed log of all your interactions with them. Note anything that seems inconsistent, any red flags.
So it's like creating a paper trail.
Exactly. To document their behavior so you don't start doubting your own memory. And if you're ever unsure, talk to someone you trust. A friend, family member, therapist. Get an outside perspective.
It's like having that reality check to make sure you're not losing it.
Right, it is. It's so important to remember that you're not alone in this.
Yeah.
And there are people who can support you.
Let's talk about the long-term effects of narcissistic abuse. I mean, some of these sources paint a pretty grim picture.
Yeah, the damage it can do can be really devastating.
Yeah.
It can erode your self-esteem, damage relationships, even lead to things like anxiety, depression, PTSD.
It's like they suck the life out of you.
That's a powerful way to put it. It really reflects what a lot of survivors experience.
Yeah.
Narcissists tend to target people who are empathetic, compassionate, people who are willing to give more than they receive. And over time, that constant giving can really deplete you, leave you feeling drained and exhausted.
They're feeding off your energy.
Yeah, using your kindness and compassion to fuel their own ego. And the worst part is, they often don't even realize the damage they're causing.
So how do you even begin to heal from something like that?
Well, it's a process.
Yeah.
And it takes time, patience, and self-compassion. The first step is acknowledging the abuse.
Okay.
Validating your own experiences. Recognizing that what happened wasn't your fault. And you deserve to heal.
Okay, so what comes after that?
Well, then it's about learning to set boundaries.
Yeah.
Prioritizing your own needs. Therapy can be really helpful for a lot of people.
Okay.
Gives you a safe space to explore your feelings and develop coping mechanisms. One source had this interesting suggestion. They said, treat everyone like a flying monkey, at least in the early stages of recovery.
That seems kind of extreme, doesn't it?
It might sound extreme, but it's about being cautious.
Okay.
About who you trust, who you share information with.
Right. Especially when you're still vulnerable.
Exactly. Narcissists are so good at using other people to get what they want.
Right.
So it's really important to be mindful about who you let into your inner circle.
So you're protecting yourself.
Yeah, from further manipulation, even if it means being a little more guarded than usual.
Okay, so as you heal and regain your strength,
yeah,
then you can start rebuilding that trust in others.
Exactly. But in those early stages, you really need to prioritize your own safety and well-being. What about dealing with the narcissist directly? Is it worth confronting them? Trying to get them to understand the pain they've caused?
Yeah, good question.
Unfortunately, confronting a narcissist directly rarely leads to anything good.
Okay.
They often lack the self-awareness to recognize their behavior, and they're experts at deflecting blame and playing the victim.
So it's like talking to a brick wall.
Yeah, it can feel that way.
Yeah.
A lot of experts recommend limiting contact as much as possible, especially if you're trying to heal.
That makes sense. But what if you can't cut them out completely? Like if you share kids with them or work with them?
Yeah, that's tough. Setting boundaries becomes crucial in those situations.
Okay.
One source described it as like building an emotional fortress to protect yourself from their manipulations.
Okay. How do you do that?
Well, it might mean things like limiting communication to only essential things, not engaging in arguments, documenting any interactions that cross the line.
So it's about protecting your energy.
Yeah, not getting sucked into their drama and recognizing that you can't control their behavior, but you can control your own reactions.
I like that. There's this technique that some sources mention called gray rocking. Have you heard of that?
Oh, yeah.
It's supposed to be a way to deal with them when you can't avoid them completely.
Right. It's about becoming emotionally unresponsive.
Yep.
You become like, well, a gray rock, boring, neutral, uninteresting.
So you're not reacting to their provocation.
Right, exactly. You're not giving them any emotional fuel. And eventually they'll likely move on to a more stimulating target.
So you're essentially taking away their supply.
Yeah. And that can be really frustrating for them because they need that drama, that intensity.
So when you take that away, their fire fizzles out. It's like a form of self-preservation.
It absolutely is. It's about protecting your well-being, not letting yourself get dragged down.
You know, it's interesting how often narcissists seem to play the victim.
Yeah, that's one of their go-to tactics. It's a way to manipulate and control.
It's like even when they're the ones causing all the problems, they find a way to make it seem like everyone else is to blame.
Exactly. It's how they deflect accountability and maintain their sense of superiority.
But how do you deal with that?
Right.
It seems like reasoning with them would just make things worse.
You're right. Trying to argue with them or prove them wrong will usually just escalate things.
Okay.
One source actually suggested treating them like a toddler having a tantrum.
Okay, that seems a little harsh, though.
It might sound that way, but it's about recognizing that their behavior is often driven by this emotional immaturity.
I see.
They're throwing a tantrum because they're not getting their way, and engaging with them on that level will just feed into it.
So you disengage.
Yeah. Don't give them the attention they're seeking. Remember, you can't control their behavior. You can only control your reaction.
I read that even if the narcissist seems to be making progress or behaving differently, you shouldn't let your guard down.
Oh, that's so important. They are masters of disguise. You know, they can be charming, attentive. They can even seem genuinely remorseful.
Wow.
But it's crucial to remember that their underlying motivations haven't changed.
So you're saying you can never really trust them?
Trust is something that's earned.
Yeah.
And with a narcissist, it's really fragile. Their actions always speak louder than words.
Yeah.
You gotta pay attention to those patterns of behavior.
It's like they're always acting.
In a way they are. Their sense of self is so fragmented, so insecure. They need constant validation, admiration from others, and they'll go to great lengths to get it.
Wow, it's exhausting just thinking about it.
It can be incredibly draining to be in a relationship with a narcissist.
Yeah.
That's why it's so important to prioritize your own well-being. You know, you can't pour from an empty cup.
What about people who can't completely avoid the narcissist?
Yeah.
Maybe they work together or co-parent. What do the sources say about that?
One source suggested limited contact.
Okay.
Only engage with them on essential matters. Keep conversations brief. Factual.
You're minimizing those opportunities for manipulation.
Exactly. Protecting your own energy, not getting drawn into their drama.
What if they try to escalate things? Make false accusations?
Documentation can be really helpful in those situations. Keep a record of any interactions that cross the line. Dates, times, specific examples.
So you're protecting yourself if things ever escalate legally or you need to involve outside authorities.
Exactly. Having that evidence to support your claims can be really important, so you can demonstrate the pattern of abuse.
After this deep dive, what's the one thing you want our listeners to remember?
You know, knowledge is power.
Yeah.
By understanding how narcissists operate, recognizing the red flags, and learning how to cope, you can really protect yourself from their manipulation and start to build healthier, more fulfilling relationships.
It's like you're learning a new language.
The
language of manipulation. You can start decoding their behavior and seeing through their tricks.
That's a great way to put it. It's about becoming fluent in the language of narcissism, so you can protect yourself.
So this deep dive has been incredibly insightful.
Yeah.
But before we move on, there's one more thing about narcissism we need to talk about.
Okay, what's that?
Their ability to, draw you back in.
Yeah.
Even after they've hurt you.
That's hoovering.
Yeah, hoovering. That term sounds kind of scary, like something out of a horror movie.
It can definitely feel that way, especially if you've been through it. It's the tactic they use to try and suck you back into the relationship after you've gone no contact or tried to get away.
Oh, wow. Okay, so how does it work? How do they try to lure you back in?
Well, they might apologize.
Okay.
Promise to change. Shower you with gifts. They might even threaten to hurt themselves if you don't come back.
It's like they'll do anything.
Yeah, they pull out all the stops to try to get you back under their control.
And it must be tempting to fall for it.
Oh, it can be incredibly tempting, especially if you still have feelings for them, or if you're holding on to hope that maybe they'll change.
So how do you resist that? How do you stay strong?
You have to remember why you left in the first place.
Okay.
Remind yourself of the pain they caused, the manipulation, all the reasons why you walked away.
It's like having a mental checklist of all the red flags.
Exactly. So you don't get blinded by their charm or promises. And having a strong support system is crucial. People you can talk to who will remind you of your worth, help you stay focused.
So surround yourself with people who lift you up.
Yes, exactly. People who support you, not people who drag you down. You deserve to be in healthy relationships.
Yeah.
Where you're treated with respect. Your needs are met.
That's a great point. So what happens when someone finally breaks free?
That's when the real healing can begin.
Okay.
It's a journey of self-discovery, of reclaiming your power, rebuilding your life on your own terms.
It sounds like a total transformation.
It is. It's about letting go of the past, embracing your worth, and creating a future where you're free to be yourself.
That's such a hopeful way to look at it. But I imagine it's not always easy.
No, it's not. Healing from this kind of abuse has its ups and downs.
Yeah.
You'll have doubts. You'll have moments where you question if you're making progress. But remember, you are not alone.
Okay.
There are resources out there to support you.
So where can people turn for help?
There are some great organizations and support groups.
Okay.
You can find information online, through hotlines, or even therapists who specialize in this area.
It's like having that lifeline.
Yeah.
To connect with people who understand.
Exactly. Healing is possible.
Yeah.
You can break free from their control.
Right.
Create a life that's full of joy, peace, authentic connections.
It's like coming out of a dark tunnel into the light.
It is. And it's a reminder that even in the darkest times, there's always hope.
It's encouraging to hear that healing is possible after something like narcissistic abuse. But before we move on, I'm kind of curious about something. A lot of sources talk about how narcissists have this victim mentality. How does that fit in? It seems kind of contradictory.
Yeah, it does seem like a contradiction, but it's actually just another manipulation tactic.
Okay.
They twist things around, to make themselves look like the innocent one.
Even when they're the ones causing the harm.
Exactly. It's all about deflecting blame, avoiding responsibility for their actions.
So they're always the hero in their own story.
Yeah.
Even when they're the villain in everyone else's.
Exactly. And it can be super frustrating for the other person,
Yeah.
Because you feel like you're constantly being gaslighted and undermined.
So how do you deal with that?
Right.
It seems like any attempt to reason with them would just backfire.
You're right. It usually just escalates things. One source I read suggested approaching them like, a toddler having a tantrum. Acknowledging that a lot of times their behavior is driven by this emotional immaturity.
So the key is to avoid getting sucked into their drama.
Exactly. You can't control their behavior, but you can control your reaction.
Some sources actually recommend keeping a detailed log of all your interactions. That seems a little extreme, doesn't it?
It might seem that way at first, but it can be really helpful in the long run. It creates this paper trail that can protect you legally, or even just remind you of the patterns of abuse, especially if they try to gaslight you later on.
So you have objective evidence.
Yeah, to counter their attempts to, rewrite history. It helps you stay grounded in reality.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
But staying detached, staying objective when someone's constantly pushing your buttons, that can't be easy.
It definitely takes practice.
Yeah.
And self-awareness. One technique that some sources mentioned is gray rocking.
Oh, yeah. Becoming emotionally unresponsive.
Right. You basically become a boring, neutral presence. Like a gray rock.
So you don't react to their trauma.
Nope. No drama, no provocations, no feeding into their attempts to manipulate you. Short, factual answers. That's it.
So you're taking away that attention and validation they crave.
Exactly. It can be really effective because, they need that drama. They need that intensity. Take away the fuel and the fire goes out.
Like cutting off their oxygen supply.
Exactly. And that just highlights how important boundaries are. Protecting your own emotional well-being is key. You can't control them, but you can control how you respond.
So after this deep dive, what's the main thing you want our listeners to walk away with?
Knowledge is power, Yeah. Understanding how narcissists operate, the red flags, the coping mechanisms, that's how you protect yourself from manipulation.
Yeah.
Create healthier, more fulfilling relationships.
It's like learning a whole new language. The language of manipulation.
That's a fantastic way to put it.
You can start to decode their behavior and see through their tricks.
It's about fluency in the language of narcissism, so you don't become a victim.
Well, this has been a really insightful deep dive. I think our listeners are walking away with a much deeper understanding of this complex personality type.
Me too.
Any last thoughts before we wrap up?
Yeah, just remember, you're not alone. There's support out there, and healing is possible. You can break free and build a life full of joy, peace, genuine connections.
It's like coming out of the darkness and into the light.
Absolutely. It's a journey worth taking.
That's a beautiful note to end on. To our listeners, thank you for sharing these fascinating sources with us. And please, keep those deep dive requests coming. Until next time, keep learning, keep questioning, and keep exploring.